r/AskReddit. What was the best "you have no power here" moment you have ever seen? The first time I had dinner at my parents' house after I got my own apartment. My dad was giving me grief as usual. Finally, I stood up and said, "I don't live here anymore. I don't have to put up with you this way any longer. I'm going home." And walked out. Most liberating moment of my life. Ex and I were moving out after a breakup. Cleaning out garage. She was being critical of my post-breakup plan of moving in with a coworker until I could find a better place to live, as most options weren't great. I took a deep breath and laughed. This puzzled her. "Why are you laughing?" she asked. I collected myself and said, "Because this is the last time I have to listen to this. You don't get to be critical of anything I ever do, ever again." It was a really great feeling, because I literally thought of the "you have no power here" as I laughed. Not me, but a story my dad used to tell me all the time. So my biological grandmother was very emotionally abusive. She was very controlling and tried to keep people within her sphere of influence. There's a reason why my grandfather divorced her. In high school, my dad had a job washing airplanes at an airport in our area, which he absolutely loved. He's a huge fan of aircraft in general. He had classes until roughly 10 a.m., and then he'd be off to work until around 10 p.m. It was what he loved. He didn't mind long hours being around aircraft all day. But one day he came home a little too late for his mom's liking. She said she'd take his keys to his motorcycle and that he'd lost privileges to it. The fact of the matter is that he bought the motorcycle himself, and he needed it to get to school as well as work. He laughed in her face and she didn't do anything. She couldn't do anything. I worked in management at a theater for a while. If the concession counter was slammed and I was able, I'd leave my post and help them sling popcorn. One night while helping out, a particularly belligerent man started cussing out a 16-year-old girl on a cash register for being too slow, even suggesting she quit since she clearly couldn't handle pushing buttons or scooping popcorn. It was pretty disgusting and I felt so bad for the girl. I stepped in and told the guy that our employees have the right to refuse service to customers who harass them as part of our anti-harassment/discrimination policy. Empathized that the lines were longer than usual, and suggested he should apologize and move on. He was pissed. Left half his order on the counter and started fuming off. Anticipating his next move, I went back to my original post that night as manager of the customer service kiosk. Oh boy, the look on his face when he saw me. Didn't want a refund of his tickets though, so I assumed he watched the movie without popcorn. I wasn't good at returning library books when I was a kid. I got lectured by my school librarian about it a lot. Fast forward 20 years and I'm a supervisor at the local public library and my former now retired school librarian goes there. One day I see her sneaking around the front desk instead of coming back to say hi to me and I immediately figure something's up. I go up to say hi and she acts exasperated and tells me she was trying to avoid me because she had overdue books. So I put on my reading glasses, pulled them down over my nose, and delivered the same lecture she'd given me countless times about being responsible and turning in books on time. A few years ago a guy stopped me in the hardware store and asked if I was a painter. I looked down at my painter's whites and said, "Yeah, I do historical restoration work." He asked how much I charged per hour, and when I told him, he immediately told me I was too expensive and dropped my rate by 25%. I had already given him my number, but he kept belittling me and saying I wasn't worth it. I just told him that I already had a full-time job, and this would be in my off hours, so it needed to be worth my while. He finally let me leave the store, then called me 3 or 4 times, each time hemming and hawing over if he wanted to actually use me or not. He's got a bunch of properties. It would be a sweet gig, but not at those prices. And I just kept telling him that's fine, don't use me if you don't want to. Eventually I recognized his number and stopped picking up. He really thought he had some sort of power over me, and I jumped at the opportunity. Luckily I didn't have to take the work. I was making good enough money as it was. He would have nitpicked absolutely everything, and probably not paid me at the end anyway. But he was so certain he'd have power in this situation that he didn't seem able to comprehend me not wanting to barter with him. We had an HR lady who was extremely power-hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him through the warehouse. Just spits out, "Oh, these are the warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them." He stops, walks over and starts talking to me about my last vacation. How buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him. We knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as hell. Not sure if it fits, but during an insanely busy weekend before Christmas, a Karen was complaining to every associate about how messy our store was. The manager had relieved the girl at the fitting room and was helping to hang stuff. Karen pulled her crap and was trying to make a point that we were messy and a horrible place to shop. This manager told her roughly, "Ma'am, we're messy at the moment because we're a popular store. And the biggest reason we're messy is because of women like you who can't be bothered to pick up after themselves. It's not the associates making the mess. It's people like you. Your type have us outnumbered." First time I actually witnessed someone deflate. I was working a lab assistant shift. I'm a tech, receiving specimens and such, when a doctor phoned the lab. He was very upset that there was a test that was taking far too long in his opinion. I said okay, let's look at it, and asked what the test was. A fungal culture. A fungal culture takes at least 2 weeks to see if anything grows. The patient was in the ER. I politely told him the test was a send-out, and they generally take about 2 weeks or longer depending on the fungus. He got all huffy and asked why it took so long and is there a way to speed up the process since he wants to discharge the patient. I chuckled a little because this is a common problem with cultures. We're literally waiting for stuff to grow. We can't just make them grow faster. I told him we don't have magical wands that make fungus grow really fast. He then asked for a lab tech because I was just a lab assistant. I then let him know I was in fact a lab tech with experience in microbiology, and I can tell him from first-hand experience that fungal cultures are some of the slowest cultures, right up there was AFBs, and assured him that if anything comes of it, we'll let ER know. He didn't really like that, but said fine and hung up. Some White House lady sat at my bar and tried to get a drink without ID. She pulled out her White House ID card which had no DOB. "I work at the White House." I told her that her bosses would be very proud of me enforcing their laws when I didn't serve her a drink. My ex was a narcissist, and I had learned to basically walk on eggshells in our relationship to try to keep the peace. We had 2 kids and I was a stay-at-home dad who did more than 90% of the parenting. One of the tactics I used with our kids was counting to 3 when they were behaving badly, and if they hadn't shaped up they would go to timeout. Cue forward to our divorce. She had manipulated the courts into granting her educational decision-making for our kids and enrolled them in a school far from me, and close to her. I began volunteering at the school to help in class to give me more time with our kids. She called to tell me that she had made the executive decision that I couldn't do that anymore. I told her she had no right to make that decision. She pulled out the education decision-making card, and I told her that gave her no right to tell me what to do on my own time. She started ranting and wouldn't let it go. She had grown accustomed to me just giving in and I wasn't doing that anymore. She started getting really angry and yelling. Without even thinking about it, I just said, "1." She paused for a moment, and then started into it again. I said, 2. By that point she got what I was doing, I think, because she took a breath and started a bit more calmly. But then she got to yelling again and I said, 3. And I hung up the phone. She immediately called me back and I ignored the call. She kept trying and I kept ignoring it. 10 minutes later I called her back and we started talking again. She didn't yell, and of course I kept volunteering at my kids' school because I'm a good dad, damn it. After dumping me, my ex reached out to express her opinion of the woman I was dating and how it wouldn't last because she's awful. Awful enough for me to marry her and have a kid apparently.